Okay, so as I said, we're doing something a little bit different today. I think this is the first time we've done this kind of service here at UUI, certainly the first time I have. I invited people to send in questions throughout the week, which I will answer, and then we're going to have some spontaneous questions for me to attempt to spontaneously respond to. We'll see how this goes. This may be the last time we do this sermon. Short-lived tradition is what this may be. So the first question that I got, or the first question that I'll respond to, summarize in one sentence what Unitarian Universalism believes for lay people to understand. Right? Summarize in one sentence. So I'm reminded of the famous story in which a Rabbi Hillel was challenged to summarize the Torah, the Jewish scripture, while standing on one foot. And rising to the challenge, he stood on one foot. You can't see it, but I'm standing on one foot. And he said, "That which is hateful to you, do not do to your neighbor. The rest is commentary." I'm not going to get as pithy as Rabbi Hillel. And also, Unitarian Universalists, as a rule, we try to never say in one sentence what could be said in 14 paragraphs, complete with footnotes and recommendations for further reading. But if given just one sentence, I would say something like, Unitarian Universalism is a religious tradition in which people of many different beliefs and backgrounds come together to freely search for truth and meaning, while committing to bring more love and justice into the world in the service of our common humanity. That's serviceable. Oh, thanks. Now, I'm not blown away by it. It works. I'm not blown away by it. It doesn't capture the transformative power of our Universalist message that all people are worthy of love. It doesn't really capture the depth of our seventh principle that we are inextricably interconnected to each other, to all living things, to the web of existence. It doesn't capture our feel for the wonder and mystery and sacredness of life and the universe. And there's nothing about coffee or chalices or rainbows or committee meetings, right? But it's a start. It is a start. Second question. My family always asks why people of different backgrounds, especially atheists, attend the UU Church. I love this question. There are so many good reasons to go to church. People come to church to be intellectually challenged, to be reminded of their highest ideals, to be inspired by great acts of human courage, to be uplifted by the beauty of artistic expression. We have had quite a lot of that today. To grow in kindness and compassion. People come to church for friendship, for fellowship, for shared interests, for shared activism, for shared meals, right? To eat together. People come to church to laugh, to sing, for peace and quiet, for comfort. This is a place where our children are educated and affirmed and lifted up in the fullness of their person. This is a place where people of all generations connect with one another, and how rare is that space? And this is a place where people care for one another. So where else do you get all of those things in one place? Right? There are many different institutions where we can get different kinds of human needs met, right? There are universities and libraries and schools to educate us. There are places of work where we can go to be creative or productive, hopefully both, or to just make a living, which we have to do. There's gyms for our bodies, right? But churches are uniquely devoted to caring for our moral, emotional, and spiritual health. Interpret that last word however it works for you. And there's no other institution that has that commitment to us and does it in such a multifaceted, multi-generational way. Now, the UU twist on this institution is that we aspire to create this depth of community while allowing each individual the freedom to pursue their own truth and follow the light of their own reason and their own conscience. For one thing, this gives people room to grow and evolve and to change throughout their lifetime without losing their community. As our board president, David Jackaway, likes to say, this is a place where you can change your mind without changing your church. We also see the diversity of belief as a strength, as a positive thing. The universe is big. Reality is big. Truth is big, right? So whatever truth we may have, it is just a piece of a truth that is much larger than that. So we like the variety of perspectives. We like to learn from one another and to have our curiosity piqued and to challenge our own viewpoints. And in creating a community where that is possible, we model the very values of love, acceptance, and openness that we want to see in the world. So as UUs, we often say, we need not think alike to love alike, and at our best, we embody that spirit in our community. And I think that that is a community that anyone would want to be a part of. And this question was kind of an oddball question. What percentage of UU congregation, I love this question, I'm sorry, that wasn't disparaging. I love this question. What percentage of UU congregations with the word church in their name do not include a C in their acronym? Like, for example, UUI, Unitarian Universalist Church of Indianapolis, no C in the acronym. I'm not sure if the person was like up late at 2 in the morning, like, I have to know. So for this question, I turn to ACE researcher and numbers enthusiast David Jackaway. David in the back, take a bow. David looked into the email addresses of every UU congregation in the country, and he parsed the numbers, and he came up with the following information. So the UUA website lists 1,081 Unitarian Universalist congregations in the U.S. 450 of the congregations include church in their name, a little less than half. 436 include fellowship or congregation, and of the remaining 195, most use society or parish. So of the 450 churches, there are 131 that use an acronym of their name and their email address so that David could actually track them down. And of those, 111 include the C for church as part of their acronym, or 85%. So we are a part of the humble 15% who do not include a C in their acronym, and now you can all sleep better at night having that question answered for you. But this leads into a question that is often asked, which is, why do we call ourselves a church when we are not a Christian church? Is that the right word for what we are? And historically, Unitarian Universalism grew out of Unitarian Christianity and Universalist Christianity, and so our first churches were Christian churches. Now that Unitarian Universalism is not exclusively or explicitly Christian, many UU congregations do avoid that language. They call themselves congregations or fellowships or parishes, etc. For historical reasons, UU fellowships tend to be lay-led congregations without a minister. If it calls itself a fellowship, that may be true of it. And UU congregations that call themselves churches tend to have called ordained ministers. Personally, as far as this question goes, I tend not to get too worked up about language. And I am fine saying that we are a church because we do churchy things. I think that our membership chair, Connie, finds this answer very unsatisfying. But Connie, that is the best that I have to tell you. We do churchy things. Another question about being a part of the church. You often say something that concludes with something like, the church is not for the people. Why not? And explain this passage, this language. So what this question is talking about is every first Sunday of the month we have a practice of recognizing new members during the service and welcoming them into membership at UUI. And I use that time to very briefly explain what it means to be a member of this community. Members are people who have made a commitment of their time and their talent and their treasure to help guide UUI into the future. More prosaically, members have signed the membership book, and they have the privilege of voting during congregational meetings where important decisions are made. So I usually say something to the effect during this time, UUI does not exist for its members, but it could not exist without its members. So, the person is asking, what does that mean? UUI does not exist for its members, and who does the church exist for if not its members? And the short answer is everyone. Everyone. We are an institution open to the public, and anyone can walk through our doors on any given Sunday, and we are here to welcome them into this space, provide what we can of spiritual sustenance, of hope or healing or wisdom or inspiration. We provide an affirmation of their worth and their humanity, or sometimes even just a kind word when it is so badly needed. Now that person may then eventually find here a community, a spiritual home, or they may not, and they may walk out that service and never step through our doors again. But it may be that what we provided to that person in the hour that they were here is the most important thing that happened in the sanctuary on that Sunday, and we have no way of knowing. But the thing is, it is something that the community provides. It's not something that just I provide or the worship team provides. You all do this collectively every Sunday. You transform this physical space into a sanctuary. You build a community of hope every week, week after week, and then you welcome everybody, friends and strangers, to come be a part of that alchemy, that transformation. So it is a beautiful thing, and you all have a hand in creating it week after week. Now, outside of Sunday morning, our UU principles and our covenant commit us to service to the community and the world. Right? Love is the spirit of this church, and service is its law. El amor es la doctrina de esta iglesia, y servir es nuestra ley. The second and sixth principles of Unitarian Universalism commit this congregation to promoting kindness, equity, and compassion in human relations, and the goal of world community with peace, liberty, and justice for all. So our religious principles point us outside of ourselves as an institution and challenge us to understand our reason for being as something bigger than meeting the individual needs of members of this community. That doesn't mean that meeting those needs is unimportant. It is tremendously important. But our overall vision as a religious community is wider than that, and our aspirations are larger. Love is the spirit of this church, and service is its law. Now, the next one was the heavy question, right? Okay, so I grapple with the UUI principle of the inherent worth and dignity of every person. I grapple with this. This is easy for good people, but how about people like Hitler? How about murderers or rapists? And people like that who do intentional harm? How about those who harm others but don't mean to? For example, someone who does harmful things because of an illness. Okay, so that question is a sermon unto itself. We say that we affirm and promote the inherent worth and dignity of each person. What do we do with people like Hitler, with murderers, with rapists? And that is a question that many UUs are struggling with right now, I know, as our news feed has been full of regular and grim reminders of the capacity for humans to willfully harm each other. Whether it is the shooter in Las Vegas, or the mosque bombing in Egypt, or the Harvey Weinsteins of the world preying on women, it seems sometimes like we are just swimming in this kind of reminders of human evil. And how do we square the existence of what we call evil with our first principle, which many of us cherish as the foundation of Unitarian Universalism? I like that the questioner uses the word grapple, because I also grapple with it, and I think that we are meant to grapple with it. It is a challenging principle. It is not an easy thing to make at the core of your spiritual life. So I think we need to begin by being clear about what the first principle doesn't mean. Obviously, it doesn't mean that people don't do bad things, because clearly they do. It doesn't mean that we can't hold people accountable for the bad things that they do. We can and should hold people accountable for the bad things that they do. And this is really important. It doesn't mean that we personally have to stay in relationship with people who are doing bad things, and especially people who are harming us. This is really important because sometimes high-minded religious language, words about love and forgiveness and charity and rebirth and all of this, these words are used as tools by abusers to emotionally disarm the people that they are abusing. And we have the right of self-protection as individuals and as a community from people who would do us harm. That includes people who do harm from a place of illness unintentionally. Right? I think the appropriate stance in such a case is compassion, deep compassion for the person who is suffering from that illness. But compassion does not require us to expose ourselves to repeated harm. We also have worth. and our needs and our safety and our well-being matters. What our first principle forbids us to do as Unitarian Universalists is to dehumanize. We are forbidden to dehumanize. We can sever every relationship between ourselves and the person who is doing harm, except the fundamental one that says, I am human and you are human. As the Reverend Forest Church reminds us, we come from the same source and we share the same destiny. Now, in part, when we dehumanize the person who is doing harm, it can be a turning away from the recognition of our own capacity to do harm, which we all have within us as imperfect human beings. So it is tempting and it is easy to make the person who does wrong into something totally alien, totally other, to put them in a place where we could never go, where we could never follow. That is a dangerous thing to do spiritually. I think it is safe to say for all of us that we will never be Hitler, but do we rush to condemn the white nationalists marching in Charlottesville without taking full stock of our own human capacity for prejudice and the prejudice that may live in us? If we are a man, do we condemn the Harvey Weinsteins of the world while giving little attention to the ways that sexist culture has shaped us and may live in us? The ancient poet Terence said, "Nothing human is alien to me." And if we do not fully believe that, we might at least take it as a warning. It is spiritually dangerous to make that separation. But also, we have seen what dehumanization does precisely in the actions of a Hitler or an ISIS or a KKK. And I believe that when we allow ourselves to dehumanize, we open the door to hell on earth a little wider. We open the door to hell on earth a little wider. And so our religion simply says, this is a place you must not go. Human beings, even the worst of the worst, must be treated as fellow human beings, as children of God or goddess or children of the universe, whatever your theology is, even if at the same time they must be restrained from doing harm, even if that is the reality. They must be held as fellow human beings of worth and dignity. Now, on a personal note, it is part of my own faith, my own personal faith, that I believe in the power of love to transform even the hardest of hearts. And I believe that all people have the potential to participate in the work of love, at least eventually. Not that all people will do so, but that the potential is there. I believe that individual people are much bigger than the self that they currently inhabit. They are much bigger than they themselves know. They are certainly much bigger than what I know of them. The working of the human spirit is a mystery. And so I do not want to close off the possibility that even the most harmful person may yet be a vessel for love to enter the world. It isn't something I can prove. It is an element of my personal faith and part of how I understand the inherent worth and dignity of each person. And it is my personal take on the Universalist message that every person is worthy of love, and that is how I extend that idea to people who have done great harm. That goes beyond the idea of worth and dignity, but it holds out great hope in the power of love to heal and redeem even the most broken parts of our world. And even as that is an element of my faith, it is certainly something that I grapple with and I struggle with. Now we're going to go to the question box. And we'll take a couple of these. We're running a little long today, but let's do a couple of these. Janet?
Okay. Could our extreme efforts to be inclusive and choose language of inclusivity unintentionally turn off some potential new members?
Yes, is the answer to that. Yes, it could. So the question was, can our very inclusive language turn off people for whom that language is challenging, that language is unfamiliar, maybe that language is pushing their buttons for whatever reason? I think the answer to that is yes. I think that the follow-up is we do it anyway. And spiritual community is meant to be a place of growth. Spiritual community is meant to be challenging. And we're going to talk about this a little bit at the very end of the sermon. But one of the things that I personally need to do when I'm being challenged by language that is unfamiliar to me or that is pushing me outside my comfort zone is we have to stop and listen. And we have to take a breath and go, okay, this is really unfamiliar. And this isn't how I'm used to seeing the world. But what is that person saying? What are they telling me about their experience? In what way have they been excluded, intentionally or unintentionally? And in what way can all people be brought in? So it is a sign of spiritual depth to be able to sit with that kind of discomfort. And as people become a part of this community, I hope that one of the things that happens is that we are all growing together in that spiritual depth. So things that are uncomfortable at first become more comfortable, more familiar, and even if we don't agree with them, because UU is not monolithic, people hold different viewpoints, we appreciate how the welcoming community that we have works for people. So yes, some people may see that and immediately walk out the door. I would think that's true of any community that holds up certain values or aspirations. But for people that are willing to come in and sit with the discomfort and learn how to do that, I think the most important thing is that we have created a space that affirms every person's humanity.
What's the UU definition of grace, and how would we put grace into action?
I think there's probably not a UU definition of grace. It isn't language that gets used a tremendous amount in UU churches. Obviously, UU Christians do use that language. Other UUs probably not so much. Within the context of Christianity, the concept of grace is unearned forgiveness. Unearned forgiveness. When I think of grace, I go back to what I was talking about before, which is the power of love to transform and the mystery of the human person. I think that when we're born and as we grow up and as we find our place within the world, we kind of enter this narrative, and there are all these stories that are being told about us. There's stories that are being told about us by our family. There's stories that are being told about us by society, by the media, by our religious tradition. We tell stories about our own selves, right? We explain to ourselves who we are. And these stories are just stories, and they're necessary, but the danger is that we believe them to the extent that we mistake the story for reality. And we can entrap ourselves in a lot of different ways when we buy into the stories that are told about us without acknowledging that these are just stories. And we have within us a spirit and a mystery that is so much bigger than any one story that will ever be told about us. And I think that grace is something that breaks us out of a limiting story and enables us to step into a larger story, where something that is broken in us is healed, where a potential that has been stifled is recognized, where something that has been constricted is set free, or, again, recognizing our own human capacity for evil, when something in us that has been unloving and unkind and turned inward is able to heal so that we can move into a more loving and compassionate and kind space. Now, what that is can be a lot of different things, right? People have different theologies. So maybe grace to you comes from a spirit of love that is present in the universe, that is sort of always reaching out to you. Maybe grace to you is just a spark of the human spirit that is always open to new potential. And grace comes to you through an encounter with another human spirit, through language, through art, through a physical connection. But whatever it is, grace is that which breaks us out of a limiting story and into a larger story. And the importance of grace is that it is something that we do for one another. It is something that we do in community. It is a powerful part of our religious tradition, although we don't use that language very often. The love and the worth and the dignity of each person is a form of grace that we extend to one another every Sunday again and again. And for many people, it is a powerfully healing experience to be in a community where you are held up like that. So that is how I understand grace, and I do think that our religion powerfully offers people grace, although it doesn't always use that language. Let's take one more, and then we're going to close this out.
Please mention a few points of view shared by Muslims and UUs, in addition to charity.
So I will apologize in advance for saying that I am not particularly well-versed in Islam. I'm actually taking a world religion class next semester, so hopefully I will get more into it. So the first thing I will say is that if you are interested in the connection between Islam and Unitarian Universalism, the Star King School for Ministry, which is one of 2 UU seminaries, has done a lot of work and a lot of study on exactly that question. What is the connection between those 2 religious traditions? They have a Center for Muslim Interfaith Studies. I think it may be the first one in the country. And there are a lot of Unitarian Universalists who identify as Muslim or being in the Islamic tradition who come out of that seminary. So that would be a place to begin looking. So Islam emphasizes kindness and compassion. The Muslim people that I have known are among the least judgmental people that you will meet. They are very open to the idea that each person has their own relationship to God, and your relationship to God is your relationship to God. Now, Unitarian Universalists, some of us are theists and some of us are not theists, right? We're atheists or agnostics or what have you. But we have this idea that our own spiritual path is our own spiritual path, and that we expect people to honor the sanctity of that path. And what I have encountered very often in Islam is that when someone is on a path that doesn't necessarily make sense to other Muslims, they will still say, that is your relationship to God, that is between you and God. It is not my place to judge that. So I've actually seen within Islam a very sort of gracious extension of religious liberty. The Quran itself speaks about there is no compulsion in religion. That is certainly one of our core UU principles. Charity was already mentioned. So Islam, of course, speaks very powerfully to the need for justice and for extending kindness and compassion. Those are also deep UU values. One of the things that I admire about Islam that we do not have as much of is that they have a lot of structure for maintaining spiritual depth in life. The prayer 5 times a day, the fast of Ramadan. They have a lot of spiritual technology for keeping you engaged as a spiritual person that UUs are a little light on sometimes. So I admire that very much about Islam. And I think that's about as far as I want to speak on that. But there's a lot of really interesting interchange going on between Unitarian Universalism and Islam right now. So I would definitely, if you're interested in that, look further into that. And we will be exploring that more throughout the year and years to come. So I'm going to, since we're running a little late, we're going to go to the last question that was submitted to me offline. And then we will close our service out. Question was, people are familiar with the end zone sign from football games, John 3:16. For God so loved the world that he ... fill in the metaphor. So we should be like God and love the world. And the question is, what one thing can we do to best love the world? What one thing can we do to best love the world? And my response was very immediate, and I think it is very rooted in the particular time that we find ourselves in. So I'm not saying that this is the best thing for all time, but for the moment that we are in, I would say that the one thing that we can do is to listen. To listen. There is such an excess of opinion right now, and such a paucity of listening. And that means, in particular, I want to hold up, it means listening to people of color, and it means listening to women who are speaking up right now about the painful realities of their experience within the dominant culture, within the Black Lives Matter movement and the Me Too campaign. Their voices need to be heard, and they need to spur us to action and to change. But it also means listening in general to people that we disagree with about religion or politics or whatever it is. Not listening to persuade or be persuaded, not listening to paper over our real significant disagreements about important issues, not listening as a substitute for doing the work of creating necessary change, but listening to find our way back to our common humanity, because something has been lost in the polarization of our nation. And even where we have significant and substantive disagreements, and we need to find our way back to our common humanity within that space of disagreeing. And finally, we need to listen to our earth. We need to listen to our earth, which is urgently telling us in so many ways that our life is out of balance. And we must find a new way of living in harmony with nature. And we are running out of time to do so. So at this moment in history, listening is what we need to do. Now, listening is just the first step to action, but it is a necessary step. James Baldwin said, "Not everything that is faced can be changed, but nothing can be changed until it is faced." And listening is the first step to that. So may we find the courage to let go of our own sense of certainty and security. May we listen to those around us, listen to our earth, face that which must be faced, and then with kindness and compassion, we can begin building anew the world which is properly centered on our love for the world and our love for each other. That is our vision that we are asked to live into as Unitarian Universalists. That is our call and our challenge at this moment, and I think it begins with deep listening from a place of kindness and compassion. Blessed be and amen.